So let me start with Sushil ji. First of all, thank you very much for joining virtually. We know that you could have joined, you wanted to come here, but due to work you could not make it. So my first question is to you, sir. TEC has been at the forefront driving this particular subject when you talk about M2M and IoT. But even on top of it, your department, and I was fortunate enough along with Sharad ji and many other members to be working under your leadership, you have done a tremendous work when we talk about this particular subject, including making OneM2M Release 2 as a national standard in India. But before I go to you, sir, maybe I request Arun. Is it okay? I mean, can you share something about your project? Sorry, sir, for the intervention, because he has to share a little more information about this EU India ICT project, who has been the sponsor of this particular session. So please, sir, I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Dinesh ji. Sorry, Sushil ji, I'll just take a moment. So, welcome everybody. I'm Arun Mukherjee. I'm the India coordinator for the project. The India-EU ICT Standardization Collaboration Project, as the name suggests, is all to do with the cooperation between the European Union and India on everything to do with standardization in the field of ICT. And it has been running since 2015 and will run till 2023. There's been a lot of good work which has been done. There is a lot of support being given to Indian academia, to the administration, and to TSDSI especially. The two main cooperation partners for the project are the two SDOs respectively from Europe and India, being ETSI and TSDSI. And we are doing a lot of work not just on IoT but in other fields also. We are currently doing a project in Bangalore along with IISc for accessibility, and some extremely good work. We've got experts coming from Europe. In fact, a lot of hackathons, MOOCs, webinars and conferences are being supported. European experts are participating from various academia, from the technical institutes and organizations of Europe in dealing with the Indian experts here. So this is what our project has been doing. And OneM2M, as the experts have been speaking before me and Dinesh ji has mentioned, we're very happy that India has adopted it as a national standard. The concept of standards I won't get into, because I think Mr. T.V. Ramachandran has given a very good understanding of the importance of standards. And I think IET is an excellent platform to talk about it, because as somebody mentioned before me, there is innovation, there is evolution, and then there has to be standardization for better harmonization, cost cutting, helping in global trade, so many things. So thank you IET, and welcome to everybody for this session. Thanks Dinesh ji.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you very much. Let me go back to Sushil ji, who is a DDG IoT at Telecommunication Engineering Center. So, sir, the excellent work for which we were fortunate to be a part of it, we would like to hear from you the journey you have gone through when you touched upon this M2M and IoT subject, and especially in the recent time when you made this OneM2M release as a national standard under your leadership, and what are the way ahead you want to continue in this journey. Over to you, sir. Sushil ji. Sushil ji, unmuted. Are you unmuted, please?
Yeah.
Okay, we are good. Please.
So, good evening to all, and I am really thankful to this Tech Congress 2022 to give me an opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. In fact, I was interested to come to Bangalore, but due to some urgent issues, I could not make it. This TEC started working in M2M IoT domain from 2014, and with the participation of the multi-stakeholders in various working groups, we released 18 technical reports, and some of the important reports, they are in power sector, this intelligent transport system, safety and surveillance, remote health management, smart village and agriculture, smart cities, and in the horizontal layer like machine to machine, M2M gateway and architecture, this security and the communication technologies. The 5 technical reports we released in 21-22, and that is on smart village and agriculture, smart cities, and code of practice for securing consumer IoT and national trust. This National Trust Center work has been awarded to CDOT to develop the portal on this framework. EC has released. The code of practice has been endorsed to all the government organizations, provider and DRDO to follow these guidelines available in this. Is voluntary at present, but some of these guidelines may be made mandatory in future. And these guidelines will be helpful in securing the consumer IoT ecosystem. This communication technologies in emerging communication technologies in IoT domain and the use cases, that is also a very wonderful document, and it has covered the 5 key 16, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth mesh, and the use cases like cellular V2X, that is very important for the intelligent transport system, Industry 4.0, and the recommendations for spectrum and regulatory related issues. All these reports are available on TEC website, and these are freely available and may be downloaded from the website. A number of recommendations, they are the part of the policies and standards like 13-digit numbering scheme, embedded SIM, that is part of AIS 140 and IS 16833, and this spectrum for low power wireless technologies, spectrum for cellular V2X, common service layer, and so many other recommendations can become the part of the policies and standards. Now, coming to OneM2M, we have adopted OneM2M Release 2 as the national standards around 3 years back, and now Release 3 has also been adopted as a national standard. Now, Release 2 was also referred by BIS in IoT area and further adopted by the Smart City mission, and they included in their RFP and referred to all smart city SPVs. Now, why OneM2M has not come to all these smart cities and other IoT ecosystem while it provides a common service layer? Now, it is the point of thought. But OneM2M provides interworking with various standards and technologies. It's the future standards for the IoT ecosystem and the smart cities. We need the interworking between Release 2 and Release 3 that is required to be done by the CDEC and CDOT. CDOT is on OneM2M Release 3 and CDEC is on OneM2M Release 2. Similarly, IIIT Hyderabad is having this OneM2M Living Lab. So a lot of work is going on in India. So, but it has to be commercialized, like the smart city platforms on OneM2M. And then it will be very easy, like cellular V2X, which is the intelligent transport system and which is the future, which will be implemented in the country in near future. Then the platforms, if not standardized, it will be difficult to implement such type of applications and the technologies. So it is very much required. Like for Industry 4.0, the platform which is mainly being used in Industry 4.0, that is also having interworking with the OneM2M. So OneM2M is the future standards, we can say, but in the policy makers, they have to think like in smart cities mission that this OneM2M standard that is followed, and the future platforms, they are based on OneM2M standards. Only then it will be easier to share the data between these platforms, and even these platforms can be upgraded time to time as and when the OneM2M is going to the Release 4, then Release 5 work is in progress. Otherwise, the proprietary platform, they will be useful only for 5 years. After 5 years, when the vendor gets changed, it will be difficult to upgrade those platforms. So, these are some of the important points which the policy makers in the smart cities and the IoT ecosystem have to think over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushil ji. Thank you, Sushil ji. for clearly highlighting. As I showed in my presentation, TSDSI is a standard development organization in India, and as part of their participation in OneM2M partnership project, they transpose these specifications. OneM2M released two specifications were transposed by TSDSI, but to make a national standard, it was the work done under the leadership of Sushil ji, so that those transposed specification has become a national standard. Now, not only that, now let me go to our another panelist, Manikandan ji, because Manikandan ji represents Bureau of Indian Standard, which is a national standard organization, and they had a task to develop smart infrastructure standards. And let's hear from them that what all they have done around smart city standards or smart infrastructure standard, and how this OneM2M common service function have been integrated into it. So I go to you, Manikandan ji, to share more information, the work which has been carried out by Bureau of Indian Standard under your technical committee leadership, and where we are when we talk about those smart infrastructure standards, including IET RA, which is based on OneM2M specification. Over to you, Manikandan ji.
Thank you, Dinesh ji. Thank you so much for inviting me for this prestigious event. And when we talk about smart city standardization, BIS initiated smart standardization in the area of smart cities in 2015. Soon, when we started initial discussions, we realized that there is a lot standards can do for smart cities, even in terms of ensuring interoperability or facilitating information exchange, data exchange, or system integration. You take any key features, a smart system or solution that needs to have, there is a role for a standard to play. It requires standards. And the core idea was idea for developing a series of standards was core mission was to facilitate technology-based, standards-based technology adoption in smart city projects and deployments. So that was the very idea, and with a lot of discussion, maybe we had a large number of meetings, and in a span of 2-3 years, a lot of discussion went on, and finally in 2020 onwards, we came up with a series of standards for the digital infrastructure in smart cities. In fact, I should say it's a comprehensive set of standards, and it starts with a unified digital infrastructure smart city ICT reference architecture. So the idea was it contains a lot of reference models. So and it contains all components that is required for a digital infrastructure in any city, or it's not city, even starting from smart village to smart city to smart nation, it's scalable. So it provides, maybe I can give a brief about that standard, that smart city, which is known widely as smart city reference architecture. The complete title is Unified Digital Infrastructure ICT Reference Architecture, and the number, Indian standard number is IS 18000. So it provides reference architecture and models for information and communication technologies needed to realize a unified digital infrastructure in smart cities. This architecture includes functional reference models, technology reference model, and information reference models. So this standard is followed by a series of level 2 standards, we can say level 2 standards, like for each of the major components in smart cities, like there is standard for data layer architecture, data layer standards for IoT systems, standards for governance, and GIS, even for municipal governance, and there is standard for communication technologies. Those are the series of standards we published in a span of 2-3 years, last 2-3 years, right? And when we talk about OneM2M, we as part of this series of standard, we also developed, one of the standards was IoT systems reference architecture, because communications, ICT and IoT are major components of any city infrastructure. So in the IoT systems, while developing the IoT systems reference architecture, just a word of what to say, note. Like many of the panelists here, I can see Sushil sir, Sharat Arora ji, or even Arindam ji. They were active participants in the development of IoT systems reference architecture. And in fact, the very project was led by Arindam ji. So while developing this standard, it's not that we simply pick OneM2M specification. Before coming to that decision, we analyzed many of the published global standards in the area, like standards published by ISO committees, ITU, standards published by ITU, and standards published by other global standards bodies. To see what are our requirements and means how much it is meeting the needs, what we need, right? So, and we found after a lot of analysis, we found that it has all the, it can fit best for our requirements. So that's the very reason why we adopted a lot of OneM2M specification, referred a lot of OneM2M specifications in our Indian standard on IoT systems reference architecture. The number is IS 18004. So maybe I'll just provide a very brief about this document. So basically, this standard provides reference architecture for any IoT systems, right? And it mainly refers to three documents. One, it has a conceptual model which is taken from one of the ISO standards, ISO IEC 30141, and the functional architecture is taken from the ITU standard ITU TY 3056. And the major element of this standard, which is the common service layer architecture, which is taken from this OneM2M specifications. So, in fact, we were referring to all the standards adopted by TEC on OneM2M specification as part of this standard. So, maybe this is one perfect example where even the prominent SDOs are collaborating, or we are leveraging all the work done by all the good or best work done by other SDOs. That's all from my side. Thank you, Dinesh ji.
Thank you, Mr. Manikandan, for sharing with us the entire process and how this standard was formed while taking cues and inputs from IoT and ITU as well. And I'm sure...
just one more addition. I forgot your second question. It's about the future plans. So as a follow-up, we are developing implementation detailed guidelines on how to implement or deploy all the already published standard. So for IoT systems reference architecture as well, we are working on the detailed implementation guideline for that.
Absolutely, I think that will be very helpful, because I remember this particular initiative was asked by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. They asked the Bureau of Indian Standard to develop standards for smart infrastructure, because they wanted to integrate the smart cities mission, special purpose vehicles. So I'm sure with your guidelines and with the initiative from Ministry of Urban Development, probably this smart city mission will have this key standard as being implemented as part of the smart cities mission. So with that, we started with TEC, TSDSI, we went to BIS, they have developed these standards. You heard the Center Development of Telematics, they have built a platform based on this standard. They're signing agreements so that people can have a transfer of technologies, they can implement this standard as part of their rollout. Now let me go to Sharatji, who's representing industry. And let's hear, because he has also been involved since beginning when we started studying, developing and implementing the standard, more from an industry contextual point of view. One, the OneM2M implementation. The second side, which Sushilji shared, the India has also adopted EN 303645, which has become an Indian standard, national standard for code of practice, taking care of the security element of the consumer IoT. So those two things, more from an implementation point of view. And I know you are also doing a new initiative around education in the rural areas. And I would also like to hear from you, how are you making use of this technology and standards, especially OneM2M, as part of this new initiative? Over to you, Sharadji.
Good evening, Dineshji, and thank you, IET, for this excellent conference. I'll just start by repeating what TV sir said at the start of this session, which is standards are necessary, they come slowly, you have to work hard, it requires grit and determination, and before we lose the essence of what the Indian telecommunication, Seva Salam sir is here, and I just want to remind ourselves that having set up TSDSI as an SDO, I chaired, although I am representing here the industry, but I was the chair of the SGSS at the time when the OneM2M standards were transposed by TSDSI as an industry representative. So I do bring that very important perspective that when industries adopt standards, it brings around enormous prosperity. I'll quickly give you an example of AIS 140. AIS 140 is an automotive standard. It's written by Ministry of Road Transport and Highways special purpose body, which is the Automotive Indian Standards. In 2015, there were about a handful of companies, actually not one very large Indian company, that was making vehicle tracking systems. Mostly these were being imported. AIS 140 was drafted under the compulsions of the court-directed improvements in security that were required after the Nirbhaya episode, which many of us would recall. Within 5 years, that industry today has more than 200 Indian manufacturers. So one standard called AIS 140 brought 200 manufacturers. At that time, Shiva Salam sir would remember, we were bringing in the embedded SIM. Embedded SIM became the unique identifier for those vehicle tracking systems. Now, embedded SIM is actually an ETSI standard, followed by the GSMA writing the remote SIM provisioning specifications, and the ETSI GBA, generic bootstrapping architecture, which became the founding part of security for OneM2M. I think it's the standard number 10. Anyhow, the simple point I'm making is standards are done to save time, save cost, and improve reliability. And that's the message that we must not forget, that the effort being made by IET, by TEC, TSDSI, and BIS, the most important thing to take away from here is you have the telecom SDO, you have national SDO, you have industry bodies here, and I think this is why this August gathering here must take away the fact that the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and Indian manufacturing will prosper in time to come. You will see behind these standardization initiatives. It may not look, my very dear colleague Orindum was a bit dejected. I am not. I think the industry will surely adopt these standards very quickly, and I remain very, very proud and confident that OneM2M will, this step for India to endorse and adopt OneM2M is a really great step for the long term. So that was OneM2M. And remind me, you wanted a comment?
Second part was, how are you using technology and standards, especially M2M, in your new initiative about education in rural India?
Yeah, thank you. So we are at this point in time quite set in our mind that rural and remote part of India must get access to the same quality of education as is available to the urban part. And if you look at OneM2M or approaches towards standardization, we are starting with looking at what the government is doing with private networks. They say you can't boil the ocean, but what we are trying to do is to standardize what can be called a campus network. What is the minimum quality of experience that must be generated at the level of a school campus. So there are 700,000 remote and rural schools in India. And amongst the first jobs is to take the approach with standardization to see what is that minimum requirement for having a network in remote campuses. And then in the pursuit of giving remote and rural India the best in education, looking at metaverse, for example, looking at immersive education, what is the standard we must follow in order for the remotest part of the country to have the best education. So some of those works are what we are into now, and hopefully we will integrate some of this work into OneM2M as time will pass. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Do we have a link drop? Because I have one of the panelists remaining for a question. All right, so we will convey our remaining panelist who has been representing OneM2M and IET. It's unfortunate that we lost him. With that, probably I'm getting a reminder from various sides, time up, time up, time up. When we have a last session, you always land up having a time up, you cannot continue. But please give them a round of applause to our panelists. And if we get back our panelist in few seconds or few minutes, maybe we will ask for his intervention, otherwise we close the session. Thank you very much for being part of it. You have these experts, if you are present here, if you are remotely, if you want to know more about this particular session or OneM2M, please feel free to contact them. Thank you very much.
Before we move on to the next session, I'd like to request Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma to felicitate the panel.
We had a glitch, that's why we thought like we won't get you back. But I had a question, Xavier, to you, because I think we have asked question from everybody. You represent IET and OneM2M, both organizations, and you have been involved through EU India ICT project, through Indigo project, through my project, involved with India, seeing this journey around OneM2M and other code of practice, EN 303645, etc. So first I would like to know from you, while the job has been done, when we talk about OneM2M and code of practice standard, what next? What next you would like to see India should focus on when they continue their journey around this standard adoption and implementation of code of practice? So over to you, Xavier. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh, and thanks to the previous speakers for all the very insightful comments made. I think there is an element which is really the first step for everybody to consider, and that is especially in the area of IoT to have a lot of actions geared at explaining to people what is the role of standard, what is the benefit of standards in this area, especially because IoT is an area where fragmentation is really, really high. And we have many systems that pop up here and there, each of them with their own approach, let's say, to addressing problems or issues that are actually very common to all systems. And this is where OneM2M has had this interesting approach to create a kind of toolbox that can be used through the common service layer by all the systems that will make use of OneM2M. And I think it was important that Orendam from CDOT explained that it was you, Dinesh, that you don't need to replace your system to, let's say, take advantage of OneM2M, because OneM2M is a common service layer that can become the glue between the various elements of the systems, that can help break the silos and ultimately help minimize fragmentation. And since we are linking this discussion to the topic of security, I think it's very important to note that OneM2M brings a number of security functions that help addressing identification and authentication, authorization, identity management, security association, security administration, and also the handling of sensitive data. And all of this help having a unified way of addressing and delivering security functions, which in the end helps raising the bar in terms of security for all those systems. And what ETSI has been doing, I mean, in addition to its involvement in the OneM2M global partnership with TSDSI, with the Indian members, with the invaluable contribution from CDOT, with the work from TEC, what we've been doing as well in our security committee was to work on creating a set of guidelines that helped addressing the most common security issues in consumer IoT systems. Because as we know, all systems are, the security of all systems is defined by that of its weakest element. And so the weakest elements are often found in the consumer IoT devices, and therefore we wanted to help raise the bar for security in the consumer IoT space. We created a set of guidelines which have been, let's say, adopted as part of the code of practice published by TEC recently, or last year, sorry. And now the work on our side is really to focus on making sure that these guidelines and their correct implementation can be verified. So the next item in the work was the delivery of a test specification for this, which we have made available and which again has been looked into by the relevant Indian committees and is being adopted. What we're continuing to do is the work on explaining in the best way possible how to implement the guidelines that are now, I mean, provided in our own European standard, but also in the code of practice for consumer IoT security in India. And we continue basically improving how clear these guidelines are based on feedback we receive from the industry, from adopters, because we are lucky enough to have a very good adoption of that standard outside of Europe as well. And the last element of the work we're doing, and also in which we invite contributions coming from India, is that we are looking into ways to create, let's say, application-specific or sector-specific versions of the standard, so that we ultimately can have an even more focused set of guidelines. For example, we have done this for smart doorbells, and what we have done, and this can be found on the ETSI website, is we created templates for derivative work based on our consumer IoT security standard. We created templates both for the set of guidelines and also for the set of test cases that help verifying compliance to the guidelines. So I would very much invite the Indian experts to look into this work and to continue the very good cooperation we have between Europe and India in order to further develop this set of specifications. Because as you know, I mean, those security challenges that we face in Europe are not European specific, or Europe specific. I mean, we know security is a global challenge, and IoT security is a very big challenge. And it's good that we put all our energy to address this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jabir. Thank you very much for joining. Give a round of applause. Sushilji, thank you very much. Manikandanji, Urindanji. With that, we close the session in view of the paucity of time, but thank you very much for joining all around the world. With that, we close the session. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening in the next
Dinesh sir, can you
session.
please remain on stage, please? Dinesh sir, can you please remain on stage? I'd like to call Mr. N. Sivasailam sir to felicitate Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.